Welcome back to another episode of FTD Facts. This is the new generation of class, and now in this episode we're going to be talking about the controversial subject of the India-Pakistan partition. And now this video is dedicated to all of our viewers from each of those countries, as well as to anybody else that wants to be familiar with a little bit of this history. Now, ever since this partition has happened, these two countries, India and Pakistan, have several conflicting views on some things. Now, there's a lot of bias and misunderstanding of what happened, and here at FTD Facts, we don't take sides at all. So what you'll be getting is unbiased, undisputable facts of what actually happened. Now, this video is going to be divided up into 5 subsections, talking about the people, the assets, and the resources that had been divided since the partition, as well as we're going to touch on some points of conflicts that these countries have. So let's start off with a little bit of the history of the partition itself. Now, to start off, we have to talk about the fact that for almost 200 years, the Indian subcontinent was ruled by a British Raj. Raj is a Hindi form for reign. Most of India was directly under the British rule, 60% of the total area and as much as 75% of the total population. But there were a few hundred princely or native states that the British ruled indirectly. Now, at its height, the British Raj was made up of not just present-day India, with the exception of small Portuguese and French-owned territories, but was also made up of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, and also for a shorter period of time, Aden, now part of Yemen, and British Somaliland, which you can tell by the name is now part of Somalia. Now, when World War II ended, the British realized that they could no longer hold on to India, and in early 1947, Lord Louis Mountbatten, he was the last governing official of British India. He set a deadline for independence for August 15, 1947. Now, on July 8th, the British lawyer Sir Cyril Radcliffe arrived in India with a plan that divided the Hindu majority lands from the Muslim majority ones. Then, in August of 1947, the British finally left after partitioning the Indian subcontinent into 2 separate nations, which were India and Pakistan. On August 14th, Pakistan became an independent country, but it faced several problems. One of those issues was that it never had natural borders such as a river, a sea, or some sort of mountain range. Also, Pakistan was divided up into 2 regions, and these 2 regions were West Pakistan and East Bengal. And those 2 regions were separated by about 1,000 miles of land that belonged to India. So as you could imagine, it was pretty difficult to govern a country where one land was over here and another part of the land was way over there. Now, also, when it came to drawing the borders, one of the big issues was that no amount of population distribution could perfectly divide the Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. 62% of the area of undivided Punjab was given to India, along with 55% of the population. Now, the Punjab region was split into Punjab, Pakistan, and Punjab, India, following the independence and partition of the 2 countries back in 1947. Now, this border ran from Kashmir state south along the Uj River, leaving one sub-district of the Gurdaspur district to Pakistan and giving the rest all to India. And now, guys, before I continue, I want to know, what do you love about your country? Let me know down there, as well as if you are proud of your country, regardless of what your country is. Let me know by hitting the like button. Now let's talk about the refugees issue. Now, when Radcliffe's plan to make the division became public, a lot of violence and riots broke out all over the country. Now, the partition had left up to 1 million people dead and forced 20 million people to move one way or the other across the new border. So millions of people found themselves living in the wrong country and became victims of discriminatory attacks. People thought that if you're Muslim and wanted to be safe, you had to move to Pakistan. If you were non-Muslim, you had to go to India. Now, this led to one of the largest mass migrations in history. 5.3 million Hindus fled from Punjab and Sindh into India, and 5.9 Muslims fled from India into West Pakistan. Also, 3.3 Hindus fled East Bengal, and also 1.3 million Muslims fled from India into East Bengal. And more than 1 million refugees migrated from East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, to West Bengal in India. Now on April 8, 1950, there was a pact called the Delhi Pact. Now this was signed in New Delhi, India by India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and Pakistani's Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan. Now the pact was to allow refugees to return safely to where they came from to take care of any unfinished business that they had, as well as all abducted women and stolen properties were supposed to be returned, and the pact also cancelled out any forced religious conversions. Now let's talk about some of the assets that were divided up after the partition. Among other assets that had to be distributed were the wine cellars, and those would stay in India because Pakistan would be an Islamic state where alcohol is haram. However, Pakistan was supposed to be monetarily compensated for its share of the value of the wine. Now at the time, there was only one government press that printed the money, and India did not want to hand that over. So when Pakistan began its existence, it used Indian currency and stamped the name Pakistan over India. Now in terms of the military, this was one of the major issues because at first the British were reluctant to divide up the forces, but eventually it was agreed that they would split this 36% and 44% between Pakistan and India respectively. Now the soldiers were given freedom to join whichever country they wanted, so Muslim forces went to Pakistan and non-Muslim forces went to India. Now the thing is, now in Pakistan's army, their army of 150,000 men needed 4,000 officers, but there were only 2,500 trained Muslim officers. So Pakistan did what it had to do, and it had to take about 500 British soldiers for the time being. Now we move on into the Kashmir controversy. So the tricky part of the 1,800-mile line dividing Pakistan and India laid north of Punjab, and this used to be the princely state of Kashmir, and its ruler had to decide whether to join India or Pakistan after independence. Now the state had a mostly Muslim population, but a Hindu ruler who wanted to keep Kashmir independent, and because of this a rebellion broke out and caused the king, Maharaja Heer Singh, to ask for India's help. This resulted with Kashmir joining India. Now the war broke out between the two countries over this in 1948 and again in 1965 and also again in 1999. The Indo-Pakistan War of 1947 to 1948 created a state called Azad Jammu and Kashmir, also known as AJK, which is a self-governing administrative division of Pakistan. Now most of Kashmir at this point is India held, while Pakistan holds the eastern portion, and depending on who you're talking to, the map of India and Pakistan could vary. Now this is because the line that divides the two countries, it's not actually an international border determined by officials, but rather it's considered a line of control which was the result of a ceasefire. And the fifth point of controversy that we're going to look at is the Siachen Glacier. Now to further complicate things, there's also a line of actual control in the Indian subcontinent's high north, dividing the territory that is held by India but sometimes claimed by Pakistan from territory held by China but claimed by India. Yeah, pretty tricky. Hopefully you got that. Now this area is called Aksai Chin, and it was occupied by China during the brief Sino-Indian War in 1962. Now India and Pakistan agreed to respect the line of control by the Simla Agreement in 1972, but this document actually left out the Siachen Glacier, which India then occupied in 1984. And occasionally battles have began over this area, and the Siachen Glacier is a great place to have because it's considered the largest single source of fresh water on the Indian subcontinent, and it's also the highest battleground in the world. And the Indian soldiers there are at 21,000 feet above sea level. Now it serves India's interest to guard this glacier, since this glacier prevents a direct link between Pakistan and China. So there you have it, guys. That concludes this episode of FTD Facts. We only scratched the surface. So guys, if you want a part 2 and if you want some more on this, let me know down there in the comment section. There was a ton of information that we obviously couldn't fit in this video. Again, there's no hate coming from us. We just like to take a look at the facts and hopefully come to an understanding. That's how we do it here on this channel. It's an open conversation, so feel free to join in on the conversation down below in the comments. Until next time, guys, I'm Leroy Kenton, and hopefully you guys, if you weren't familiar with this history, now you found out a little bit more of why there's some contention between the two countries at times.